Hey everyone, this video is an excerpt from my Nikon Zf Tutorial Course. It's a video walkthrough that's going to take you through the setup menu and the network menu, some of the things that you're going to want to get to first when you first get this camera. If you want to see walkthroughs for all of the other menus and then examples of how to use all of the focus and exposure settings and customize the camera and things like that, you can check out the full course at photocourses.link/Nikon. And then you can get 20% off that course using the code TUBE20. I hope you enjoy. Nikon's menus honestly aren't organized in a very logical manner, at least for me, the way things are grouped. So what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to go through the menu settings that are important to know to get this camera set up to start creating images. We're not going to go through every single menu option in this chapter. We'll get to all of the others as appropriate for the topic that we're learning about. But first, we're going to start in the Setup menu. So press the menu button, go to that wrench icon, and then Setup.
And the first item you're going to see there is Format Memory Card. Remember, we mentioned in the camera orientation that you're going to need to format your memory card before the first time you use it with that camera, and then periodically after that. So this is where you are going to do that. And just follow the prompts in this submenu after you have backed up everything on that card. In language, you can choose your language for the menus and displays. In time zone and date, you can set the time zone that you're located in, the date and time, and the format that you want for the month, day, and year. At the bottom of the list has daylight savings time, but I'd recommend setting this first. So set this to on if you're currently observing daylight savings time, which is the summer months in the United States. Then you can set your time zone with the up-down pad, and note that the UTC number won't necessarily match if you're currently in daylight savings time, but you can use the geographic areas as a reference for which time zone you're in. And then you can set the current date and time. And remember that this can be automatically pulled using the SnapBridge app if you have the app connection set up. And just note that also those hours are in the 24-hour format, not the 12-hour AM/PM format. And then in date format, choose the format that you'd like for the year, month, and day, how that's displayed. There are quite a few options for your monitor and viewfinder brightness and color balance. So let's start with monitor brightness. I like to leave this at 0. You can turn it up if you're in bright light and you need to see the screen better, or if there's a glare, and then you can turn it down if you're in dark environments and you don't need it all the way bright. 0 is just a good starting point, a starting compromise to be able to both see the display easily and conserve your battery. The higher that display brightness is, the faster it's going to eat away at your battery. For the viewfinder brightness, I like to set this at auto. As you're looking through the viewfinder, it's going to automatically adjust the brightness depending on the ambient light conditions. And if you don't like auto, you can set a manual brightness from -3 to +3. And then you'll see options for the monitor and viewfinder color balance. You can adjust the temperature and tint of the picture you see in your monitor and viewfinder. If, for example, you find that warmer tones are easier to look at, so you can warm that up here. And note that that is only going to affect what you see in the displays. Your actual image won't have those corrections, so it'll look different. I just like to keep both of these off for more accurate renditions of how my image is going to come out. Finder display size has 2 options, standard and small. If you're looking through the viewfinder and you struggle to see the entire composition at once, like you're having to move your eye all around to see the whole frame, you can set it to small, and that's going to make that image a little bit smaller, which may be easier to see the entire composition at once. The limit monitor mode selection is a great one to look at, where you can set the choices that you want available when you press that monitor mode button. And if you need a reminder of what all of the different modes are for the monitor selection, you can find that in the text for this video. But as an example, I like using the viewfinder for photography, but I prefer looking at the monitor for playback and going through the menus. This means that I would never only use the viewfinder, and so I have that deselected as an option when I'm toggling through those monitor modes, so I just skip over that one. Auto rotate info display is a good one to turn on for when you rotate that camera from a horizontal orientation to a vertical orientation. The symbology will also rotate with the camera to make it easier to read. The AF fine tuning options is a somewhat advanced feature that you might want to look into if you ever find that your lens consistently autofocuses soft. So it's not as sharp as you think it could be. Now, before you do that, make sure that you identify it is indeed the lens itself focusing and not that it's your own focus technique or your shutter speed is too slow. If you do identify that it's where the lens is focusing, you can read more detailed instructions about how to go through this process in the text for this video. In non-CPU lens data, you can input the focal length and maximum aperture of older lenses or lenses that don't communicate any of that information with your camera. And that can help with some exposure settings, and it's also recorded in the metadata that's attached to your images. So you can set which number that you want to give that lens, enter that lens's focal length, and its maximum aperture, which is the lowest or smallest f number. And you can store up to 20 lenses here, and then just go through and select that lens that you're using when it's on your camera. Save focus position, I think, is a good setting to set to on when that is on and you are using a compatible Nikon Z lens. Your lens focus distance is going to be saved when you cycle the camera power. If this is off and you turn that camera power off and then back on, your focus is going to be reset back to infinity rather than at the distance that that lens was at when you turned the camera off. So that's why I would recommend keeping this on so that focus distance is saved. Save zoom position for power zoom lenses, that does the same thing as the save focus position setting, but that's going to save the zoom setting that those power zoom lenses was at when the camera power was cycled. If auto temperature cutout is set to high, the camera will continue to operate. It's not going to automatically turn off as it hits much higher operating temperatures. This could make the camera dangerously hot to the touch. I don't want to damage my hands or the camera, so I just set this to standard. Clean image sensor is where you can control the ultrasonic vibration that will hopefully shake off any fibers or dust that are attached to the sensor. If you select start, it's going to clean that sensor right now. If you have it set to automatic cleaning and set clean at shutdown, that automatic vibration feature is going to activate every time you turn the power off. Or you can just turn automatic cleaning off if you don't want to do that. If you ever notice any dust spots on your sensor, instead of having to go through and try to remove all of those manually with whatever post-processing program that you're using, you can create a dust mask here. And the instructions for doing that are outlined in the text. There is a little bit of work involved, and you have to use the Nikon NX Studio software to do that. And just note that the mask that you will create here is only for the sensor itself, not necessarily your lenses. If you ever notice a dead pixel, which usually appears as a bright white spot, you can use pixel mapping to try to fix this. When you do that, ensure that the camera is not warm, it should be cold, like the first time you power it on for the day, and that you have a fresh battery. Start pixel mapping and don't touch the camera until it's complete. When it's complete, you'll want to turn the power back off. And this is only available when you have a compatible Nikkor lens attached to the camera. You can add comments of up to 36 characters to your photos in Image Comment. Under Input Comment, you can use the keypad to create whatever comment that you want to attach to the photos, and then highlight Attach Comment, press OK, and now all future photographs are going to have that comment attached to those photos until you go in and disable this. Those comments are going to appear in playback and as a comment in the photo's metadata. Now, I find this rather cumbersome. I'll usually add metadata in my post processing workflow, but if you really need to remember a vital piece of information about a photo that you can't record otherwise, you can use this feature. You can attach a copyright notice to all of your photos. In copyright information, go to Artist, and this is where you can enter your name using the keypad. Then go to Copyright and enter your name or however you want the copyright to appear. And once you have those entered, highlight Attach Copyright Information. And when that is checked off, every single subsequent photo is going to have the artist and copyright field attached to the metadata with whatever information you have in those fields. You can create metadata presets to automatically apply certain things to all of your images, like a caption, a headline, city, state, and country information. The instructions for creating these presets are all going to be outlined in the text. You can select from a number of presets that you create, highlight that preset and press OK, and then that preset is going to be attached to all subsequent photographs. Once you're done using that preset or all of your presets, just turn this off so that that preset is not embedded in any photos that it shouldn't be added to. You can attach 60-second voice memos to your photos, which might be a really handy note-taking feature that you can use. Under Control, you'll set whether or not the voice memo control that you program to your camera behaves as a press and hold button to record the memo, or a start-stop button when recording the memo. And then in audio playback, you'll set where that voice memo is sent to for playback along with the volume. Your camera can make a lot of sounds. So under Camera Sounds, you can set whether or not your beeps are on or off. So if beeps are set to on, that's going to beep to confirm an autofocus lock whenever you touch the touch screen using a self-timer or interval timer shooting. If you still want to have all of those beeps enabled but want to turn off the touchscreen beeps, you can select off for touch controls. And then you can also set the volume of those beeps and whether or not they are a high-pitched or low-pitched sound. If you need to go completely silent and turn all of those sounds off, you can enable silent mode. And when you choose on for silent mode, in addition to disabling or muting all of the artificial sounds, that's also going to enable the silent electronic shutter and disable your flash. Like I said, that's useful if you need to quickly be discreet. However, there are a lot of limitations to silent mode. Long exposure noise reduction and flicker reduction are disabled. For example, frame rates might drop, and the electronic shutter itself has several disadvantages that you can read about in an article linked in the lesson notes. So really only turn this on if you need that electronic shutter and be aware of those limitations. You can activate the touch screen for various controls in Touch Controls. If you ever find this to be a nuisance or you don't like using it, you can disable it by selecting Disable. You can have touch controls on all the time or only on for playback mode, allowing you to zoom in and navigate between photos. And if you turn on glove mode, it's going to make that touchscreen twice as sensitive, which can help if you're trying to use it while wearing gloves. When your monitor is flipped into the self-portrait position, so it's facing forward, self-portrait mode is going to be activated, which will activate that monitor no matter which view mode that it's currently in. So that monitor is going to come on no matter what when it's flipped forward. It's also going to disable all buttons except for the shutter button so that you don't accidentally hit something while you're holding the camera in that awkward self-portrait position. And there's no harm in keeping this enabled even if you don't do self-portraits. But if you don't want the camera to do any of that when you flip the screen forward, you can turn this off. If your camera is connected to an HDMI device, you have some options for that. Under HDMI, you can set the resolution of video signals sent to that HDMI device. The camera is going to choose that for you if set to auto. The output range is going to set the tonal range sent to the HDMI device, and that's going to vary depending on the HDMI device that you have. Auto is going to work with most compatible monitors, but you can set manual controls also. Limited is going to set the RGB signal range from 16 to 235, and then full is going to use the entire range from 0 to 255. Limited is going to make your shadow areas much brighter, so blacks are actually going to be remapped to be darker grays. If output shooting info is on, that's going to send all of the icons and information overlays that you see on your camera screen to your HDMI device. You'll want to keep this off for a clean image. If it's on, that's actually how I'm recording the monitor right now, is by having this on. Mirror camera info display, if that's turned off, that is going to turn off the camera monitor when an HDMI device is connected. USB connection priority is where you'll tell the camera what kind of connection mode to go into when it is connected to a computer via a USB cable. If it's set to upload, the monitor is going to stay off and it's just going to upload images, kind of like a memory card reader. If it's set to shooting, the monitor is going to stay on to enable tethered shooting if that's what you're doing. If your battery is old or you notice that it just doesn't hold a charge anymore, you can come into battery info to check on the status of that battery. It'll show you the current charge level, the number of times the shutter was released since the last time that battery was charged, and the battery age, 0 being a new battery and 4 is an old battery. If that battery age is showing 4, it's probably time to get that replaced. In USB power delivery, you can enable or disable external power when your camera is connected to a computer or other device if that device delivers current through the USB connection. That delivery of current to supply power to your camera can interrupt data transfer. So if you ever find that data transfer becomes very, very slow or it stops, you'll want to disable this power delivery. The camera is always going to charge when it's turned off. It's just not going to be getting power when turned on and connected to a computer if this is disabled. If energy saving is enabled, the screen refresh rate is going to slow down. It's not going to be as smooth as it normally is 15 seconds before the camera enters standby mode. All you need to do to get that screen refresh rate back to normal is zoom a lens or activate any control, and that's going to reset it. There are some other limitations that you can read about in the text. I prefer to just enable this as another way of saving battery power. It's never really been a bother for me. Slot empty release lock is going to set whether or not the shutter can be released if there's no memory card in the camera. You can set this to OK, which is the default, which means you can press the shutter button if there's no memory card in the camera. Now, I like to set this to lock just as another way of reminding me that I need to install a memory card in the camera, otherwise, no images are going to be recorded. There might be a time where you need to do a complete factory reset of this camera, and you want to be able to restore all the menus to how they were before the reset. Or you get a second camera just like this one, and you want to have identical menus. You can save all of your settings in Save Load Menu Settings. When you save those, it's going to save that setup to the memory card, not the camera itself. So that's going to create a configuration file on the memory card, and then you can load them from that memory card using Load. Most of the menu settings are saved except for things like the ISO sensitivity settings, the release mode, some of the other special modes like HDR and interval, and the AF fine-tuning options. Just note that you can only save one setup to the memory card, meaning that you cannot have multiple menu configurations on one card. This is used mostly just for backup purposes. Reset all settings is going to reset everything except for the language and time settings, and this may be useful as a troubleshooting method if you ever have problems with your camera, and you can use that previous option to back up those settings before you reset it. Firmware version is going to display the current firmware version for the camera body and any attached compatible accessories. But this is where you can also update your firmware for the camera or any of those attached accessories. All you need to do is save that firmware file from the manufacturer onto the memory card and then update it here in this menu. Full instructions for doing so are in the text for this lesson. We're now going to hop down and take a quick look at the network menu. That's the little globe icon with the lines around it. Enabling airplane mode will disable the camera's Wi Fi and Bluetooth, and that can help extend your battery life if you don't want to use the wireless features. In Connect to Smart Device, this is where you can connect to and set the options for smartphone and tablet connections using the SnapBridge app. And we looked at the pairing and select for upload options in that SnapBridge lesson. There are a few other options here. Wi-Fi connection is used to start a Wi-Fi network that you can connect to with the provided SSID and password. And then in Wi-Fi connection settings, you can change that SSID name, your password options, the channel used, view your current settings, or just reset everything to the defaults. Upload while off, when turned on, is going to continue an image transfer that's in progress when the camera is turned off. It's going to keep transferring those images until all of the images in the queue have been transferred, and then the camera is really going to turn off. And then location data for smart device, that's going to show you the location, altitude, and time data if transferred from a connected tablet or smartphone. If you have an ML-L7 wireless Bluetooth remote, you can set all of those options in this menu, and that's further outlined in the text for this lesson. You can connect to a computer, and in network settings, you can create a profile to connect to an existing network or create a direct connection to a computer. Just follow the wizard instructions to connect. You can also copy and paste connection profiles to and from your memory card. In connection type, you'll choose whether the current wireless connection is being used just to transfer photos or also for tethered shooting, for actually controlling the camera using the Nikon software. There are a lot of things to look at in options. You can enable or disable automatic uploads as those images are created. You can delete images from the camera after upload, which I don't think is ever a good idea. You can choose whether those files are uploaded as RAW plus JPEG or HEIF files, or just JPEG or HEIF files. Those RAW transfers, if you have RAW selected, that's really going to slow things down. You can also choose the source memory card for automatic upload, upload all photos in a folder, and also deselect or unmark all images for transfer. And that's going to stop everything that's already been marked for transfer. You can also connect directly to an FTP server, automatically uploading photos to that server. And those settings in this menu, they're very similar to the connect to computer options. You do have the addition of having to enter the FTP server settings in the create profile submenu. And then there's also some additional options, including how to handle existing files, marking uploaded photos for protection, and then managing your FTP root certificates. Another new feature is that you can connect to other cameras, and that's going to let you do things like synchronized shutter release if you want to capture photos at the same instant in time from various angles using multiple cameras. And you can also sync the clocks from one camera to all of the others. So in this menu, under synchronized release, you'll set that to on so that all cameras in the network release the shutters at the same time. Network settings, very similar to the other network settings where you can create a profile. After creating a profile on one camera, you can then copy that profile to your memory card and then load it into the other cameras so you don't have to repeat all those steps. You can group cameras for synchronized shutter release and then name that group. You can also choose which camera serves as the shutter release or the master, and then which ones will synchronize to that. Those are the remote cameras. The remote camera list will be available on the master camera, and that's going to display all cameras on the network. Synchronized date and time is going to set all of the remote camera clocks to the master clock. Atomos has some Bluetooth accessories that are used to connect and synchronize compatible devices for large productions so that all of your time codes amongst multiple cameras are synced to one another. And you can set up some of these options here. Connect is going to connect to a previously paired device. The first time you do that pairing, you'll do that in save pairing. So that's going to pair to these accessories. Delete deletes the pairing, and then camera is where you will choose the camera name that is listed on the Bluetooth device. And once all of that is connected, in order to get full functionality, you'll need to enable the record time codes option in the video recording menu. When you're connected to a computer via USB, you're going to set which type of transfer protocol is used. You should only set this to iPhone if you are actually connected to an iPhone. For everything else, just leave it set MTP PTP. When choosing a network to connect to, you can select whether or not you only see 2.4 gigahertz bands, 5 gigahertz bands, or both. Whichever option you choose here, those are the only networks you're going to see in the list. And then if you ever need to view your camera's MAC address, you can do that here. So those are all of the basic camera settings that you're going to want to set up and be familiar with before going any further. In the next lesson, we're going to set up our photo shooting menu so we can start creating some photos.